And we're live here. Roland GRIMES. Once again, Roland GRIMES show live here on WBGR Sports Radio. We're rolling into another live edition of Wednesday night. We're going to talk about, of course, the March Madness finales. And boy, do we have some action for you. But before we get started, of course, I'd like all of you to say hello to my esteemed cohort, Miss. Actually, we have now patented your name, Coach Tanya.
Coach Tanya. Okay.
Everybody say hi to Coach Tanya. Hi, Coach Tanya.
Hey.
How are you?
Good.
Oh,
that sound like my little girls when I used to coach little girls. Hi, Coach Tanya.
Okay, I'm just going to ignore the fact you even said that.
What?
They sound like my girls.
Not that you sound.
No. I overheard.
Not
what you said.
that you sound like my girls. But
you said that sounds like your girl.
Yes.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, and I also have my resident engineer once again, Mr. Lionel Green, and on the video and audio tonight, my cohort, Mr. Ron Jackson. Folks, you go to our Facebook page, Roland GRIMES or LaTanya Mosley. You can find us, and of course, call in 301-429-9247. 301-429-9247. Lionel, I'm going to ask you to join us in some of this commentary this evening until the phone calls come in.
No problem.
Coach Tanya.
Yes.
I'm going to start with you. Now, you told me you watched some of the men's games.
Yes.
Now, what stuck out in your mind the most from the Final Four, the championship game? When you walked away from it, what did you take away from that?
Well, with the semifinal games with Kentucky losing, like I said that some people said that was going to happen in the beginning.
People like me. So go ahead.
They played hard, but they were able to be beat. And it showed that they do have a weakness. They do have really good people on their team, but they have a weakness, and they're able to be beat. With the final game, my son, that was funny, I was watching it with my 9-year-old, and I asked him who he thought was going to win, and he said Wisconsin. Because they had
agreed with him, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he said because they had a great defense, they followed their shots, they knew how to rebound, so he felt they were going to win. And I thought they were going to win all the way up until the last quarter. So.
Okay. So, in a few minutes, we're actually going to, one of the things that I walked away from it with folks is the danger of the press conference. And we're going to talk about that in some detail this evening, because I heard some stuff on these press conferences that just made my skin crawl and my mind freak out. So I've been a part of some of those after-party press conferences, after-game press conferences, and of course I've been around this game of sports for a long time, and a whole lot of let's say emotion, but maybe more than emotion, some revelations came out in those press conferences, and we're going to play one or two of those for you this evening so we can talk about it. Folks, once again, 301-429-9247, Roland GRIMES Show. Let's start with the end, and we're going to work our way backwards. So, Duke played Wisconsin, and Duke outscored Wisconsin. In the second half, from what I understand, the Duke Blue Devils, Blue Bloods I call them, the second half, all of the points were scored by the freshmen. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. How in the world did that happen? Lionel, do you have any idea?
They came to play.
They came to shoot.
Yeah, they came to shoot. Yeah, they came to shoot, and they scored.
Now, what I remember was the big man was on the bench quite a bit, though.
Yeah.
So it was these guards that weren't even on the radar, so to speak, in terms of the pregame hype, who stole the show from the players at Wisconsin and from the big man at Duke. Fresh legs. So how does that work, man? The guards, when you're shooting jump shots, you get to the point where you get into a rhythm, and it's hard to have that rhythm broken unless somebody breaks it. If you're a shooter, you're a shooter, and once you get going, you can. The basket seems like it's a mile wide, but these guys also were driving and taking that thing inside, and was flipping that ball up on the big men and going in and grabbing rebounds. Now I don't know if that was the strategy to have them push in because the big men were in trouble for Duke, and they had 3 fouls, 4 fouls
Right.
going into the second half, and definitely in the final moments. So the guards became more aggressive, and I literally sat there, and I thought to myself, this is not getting ready to happen where these guys are going to take control of this game on both sides of the ball and under the boards. Now, do you think that was a coaching strategy, instinct, or just seizing the moment?
Could have been a little bit of all of the above.
Okay.
Because their coaches probably did tell them how to go about that. But when you're in that moment, you just go with what you know. And them being freshmen, them being young, they were just out there and they wanted to play and they wanted to win.
Now, as I mentioned before, when Syracuse won the national championship in 03, they were pretty much led by freshmen, Carmelo Anthony, Jerry McNamara, and then there was a guy who was a six-man, Billy Eaton. By the same token, when Kentucky last won the championship, they were led by freshmen as well. So is there a phenomenon out there that we're missing, so to speak, when the talking heads talk about the tournament, that sometimes these young freshmen, because they don't know the fear of the moment, because they've never been there before, and because they were just stars wherever they were, and they just go in and they just do what they do naturally, that sometimes there's less pressure on them, and they get into their groove a lot easier than some of the veterans who may say, man, it's my last shot at this.
Right.
You know, might get a little tight, might get a little nervous. Does that make any sense to anybody other than me? Because oftentimes I'm the only one that makes sense to me. Stop laughing.
Well, a lot of times, in basketball, man, a lot of times these freshmen played over the summer with, sometimes with pros. Different camps, pro-am camps. So I think, and always the ego of these basketball players, the big stage is what they wait for. So I don't think their nerves are the same as maybe a boxer that's getting his first shot. At a title fight with basketball players, the stars of high school basketball teams, sometimes their stadiums are just as big as college
Right.
stadiums.
Right.
So I don't think it
And
has,
being on television is nothing new.
no, it's not new. Yeah,
Right.
I think they making sure somebody videotaping them. The kids now they practicing for the interview. You know what I mean? Although like you said, the press conference was somewhat disbobulated, but they ready to play.
So do me a favor.
And like you
I'm
said,
sorry, go ahead.
and along with that, with them being the freshmen and them coming in, like you said, they don't have that pressure because they're looking at their top scorers, their seniors to make those plays. So they don't have the pressure of, okay, everybody's watching me. I need to do this. I need to do that. They can just play and be themselves.
Now, I would also say that some of the seniors on Wisconsin's team started to make unforced errors. They started to
They started unraveling, man.
So that wasn't just me. They started
Yeah.
to trip a little bit.
Yeah.
Now you would expect it to be the opposite. So why is it that some of those veterans started to unravel when this is something that, heck, this time last year they were pretty much one game away from the national championship last year? All of a sudden they unravel, especially in the face of freshmen. I mean, I'm thinking I'm a senior, here's a freshman. First off, I'm going to blow on him,
Yeah.
and he's going to fall over.
But that's probably what they thought.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
But
that's
they didn't back down. So now it's like, whoa, what do I do? How do I accomplish and get around this?
So
And
now
then-
you crush them. When you blow on them first, then you crush them.
So then they
can't
lost-
get beat by freshmen.
But they lost their focus, and they might be thinking, okay, now I'm getting showed off on national TV by a freshman. So what do I do?
Wow.
Then it's the pressure of them being seen by all the pros.
Right.
They're being seen by everybody.
Okay.
So they're trying to.
So they're thinking about other things.
They're trying to make their mark. You know, I can. You
This
know,
is my last time.
we win a national championship. I'm in the pros.
Right.
You know, so there's a lot more pressure on the seniors than it is
Yeah, well, a
freshmen.
lot of those guys are Wisconsin aren't going pro.
No,
The pro game requires a whole lot different kind of athleticism.
Yeah.
Those of you who understand that, you can call us and weigh in on it. 301 429. Now, you know, good thing about live radio, we can talk about it.
Gotta jump.
It's a little bit. You got to jump, you got to float, you know, you got the helicopter, you know, so the percentages don't lie. In the NBA, the percentages of people can't jump pretty low. 301-429-9247. Now, when you get a chance, before we take our first station break, Lionel, if you can cue that piece, I think is marked Wisconsin. It may be marked national champions, and that is the last few seconds of the game, and I wanted to discuss that moment as it was taking place. In addition to that, we're going to talk about this press conference or a few press conferences right after that. I was very intrigued by the press conference that Kentucky held and some of the stuff that John Calipari said when they lost to Wisconsin. I thought, you know, I was really impressed with the class and the manner in which he spoke during that moment, especially realizing he just basically got embarrassed in front of a whole bunch of folks and they were the number one team. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, when Wisconsin's coach did his press conference, I thought that he really kind of lost his cool and started blaming other folks for things that happened. Now, I'm going to go there. As I'm watching the games, I'm telling you, Kentucky played Hampton, and Hampton had 18 fouls against them, and Kentucky had 2. And I kept saying, even during that time, that every game that I watched Kentucky play in the tournament, they began to get their 10-point, 15-point spread on the foul line, and then all of a sudden the other team's in foul trouble. So when they get to a game where the other team isn't getting those kind of calls, they're going to have a real tough time. And first it happened with Notre Dame, and then it definitely happened with Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin players, if you go back and review the game, Wisconsin players were beating those guys down. Under the basket, the picks, the whole nine. It was crazy to me that Bo Ryan later said, well, we don't play that kind of ball where we're real aggressive physically. And I'm like, what game are you watching, brother? You know, that's your team.
They were physical.
Big Ten, that's where they play anyway. So they were really roughing Kentucky around. What I watched was, I think there was a stretch, Coach Tanya, where Kentucky had 4 off-the-ball infractions called against them. And that's one of those things where it kind of gives you a bellwether of how the game is going to be called, because everybody can see that foul when you charge or when you go to the hole and somebody smacks you. But the off-the-ball ones, a lot of times those are discretionary because you have 2 guys banging, something's happening, etc. And they had 4 off the ball. Now, when you add that up, that's about an 8-point swing. I don't think Wisconsin had any off the ball foul calls on them in that Kentucky game. And then you had situations where the ball was shot with 1 second left on the clock, and then they got a foul as the 2 guys going for the ball. And then, of course, that one time where he shot the ball and missed it, and the shot clock expired, and the guy caught it and shot it. And I don't know, what was the explanation for that, Lionel? Do you remember? Was it we didn't hear the horn, or what was the explanation for that?
I wasn't sure. From the reaction, it looked like they didn't hear the horn.
Right, but everybody from Kentucky heard the horn because they started running.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And then it looked like maybe Wisconsin players heard the horn because they didn't move until the referee said good. They were like, yeah. Now, people in the stands kind of heard the horn.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand, you know, what was it that 3 referees didn't hear the horn?
Yeah.
You know, when I could hear it and I'm like 7,000 miles away.
Well.
Now, I know one of the referees personally.
Oh, okay.
So did you call him and ask him what happened with that?
I mean, maybe, you know, I always thought he's a little deaf in one ear, but his name is Pat Driscoll, and Pat Driscoll hails from Syracuse, and he got into a tete-a-tete with Coach Krzyzewski when Michigan State was playing Duke in the Dome, And I have my own reservations and comments about my good friend Pat Driscoll anyway, in terms of how he may view certain types of individuals. I won't get into that in this venue, but I will get into it a little later in another one. So I'm not sure that see, the thing is, we all want to say that referees are going to be impartial. They're going to be objective. No human being on the face of the earth is that impartial or that
Right.
objective. Everybody comes in with some kind of bias or prejudice. Am I wrong with that?
No, you're right.
Remember when we were dealing with McNamara, and we go play Landon, and we go play O'Connell and
Right.
Paula Six. Oh my goodness, we'd almost
They
started
hated us.
right. Oh, could we get a call at all?
No.
I mean, it was, Ron, I'm telling you, it was so bad that I watched one game and I literally started crying for the kids because they were punching, kicking, cursing, smacking our kids around, and we couldn't get a penalty called on them. And if we breathed on one of those guys, we had a penalty. And people said, well, that doesn't happen. Look, if it's happening in boys' club and it's happening in high
Right.
school, it's going to continue to happen. Now, unfortunately, those were racially motivated. And people can say whatever they want to say. Socioeconomically, racially, they can say what anything they want. But I know that I have seen schools where the teams are majority African American go into stadiums, especially in a game like football, and play against teams that aren't. And I'm telling you that the referees, the officiating isn't even close.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that I see that same kind of thing in the Final Four because I think it's more economically driven than anything else. But everybody has some prejudice and has some biases that they take into every situation. Now, I know what I heard. Now, Coach Tanya, I don't know if you heard this, and my good friend Mr. Williams just walked in, and you can tell me whether you heard this. But all I kept hearing from all of the brothers and sisters was they wanted Wisconsin and Duke in the national championship because of the racial makeup of their teams. Did you hear that? Either one of y'all heard? Roland, what did you just ask me?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. She's
I'm
handling her
sorry.
business. So there was some prevailing thought that the NCAA and folks involved with that system wanted to see a Wisconsin Duke final because of the racial chemistry, racial makeup of those two teams. Wisconsin started 4 Caucasians. Duke starts at least 2. And when you look at most of the other teams, you'd be lucky to find 2 on the entire team.
Right.
Now, I don't know if anybody else heard that but me, but did they talk about that in your neighborhood?
No.
Really?
No.
So you got to move then. I'm sorry. Mr. Wiz, you know your mic's not on. I just want, we go, you cute him? Uh-oh, here we go.
Well, actually, I did not hear that. I actually heard the opposite. In my neighborhood, they actually wanted to see a matchup between Duke and Kentucky because they felt that it would be a more competitive matchup, whereas Wisconsin didn't really seem that much of a competition to Duke than Kentucky, you know. And in my neighborhood, they don't really, you know, consider the racial aspects of the, you know, the NCAA basketball as they should be, you know. They more talk about the
Into the game
competition.
and the competition.
Right. So they don't really look deep into that.
And I think that's the way it should be. However, those of us who turn that corner on 50, like I am, and I just had a session with this past weekend with a bunch of young men who were involved in the integration of sports in the D.C. area in the 1950s and 60s, and listening to some of their commentary sort of made me suspect once again that some of that has not gone away, even in terms of athletics. Now, again, you know, at this stage of the game, I look back and I say, you know what? I've seen some things, like I talked about with that McNamara thing a little bit earlier, and I've also been a part of some of that stuff. You know, I remember when we played a football game in Nebraska, and this wasn't a racial issue. They just, man, it was almost like the Hatfields, not the Hatfields, but the Civil War. Those folks were like, you Yankees aren't going to win this game. Like, Yankees? I'm looking around like, who are you talking about? The Yankees in New York. They're like, oh, that's right, Syracuse is in New York. They were like, you're not going, they were chewing tobacco and spitting on us, and we just knew we weren't going to have a chance that day. And of course, we got beat 63-7.
They got in your head.
No, they whooped out. Let's play this.
Okay.
They got into something and it wasn't our heads. All right.
Okay.
But the next year they came to Syracuse and they were the number one team in the country, and we beat them. You know, so again, I'm not saying the refs had anything to do with it. All I'm saying is that when you go back and you look at the data, there were a lot fewer penalties called on us in that second game in Syracuse than it was in that first game.
Maybe
Talk
it's
to
like
me.
the home field advantage thing.
I understand,
You know.
but the referee's supposed to throw the flag both ways, right?
You're right, but when you're at home, sometimes you get those calls.
Well, I mean, and it makes sense because first of all, you're a referee, so you come. So here's the deal. Let me paint the picture. You're a referee, so you come to my hometown, and you're going to be officiating game between my hometown team and another team that I can't stand, right? So first of all, as soon as you come to town, I'm going to put you up in a nice hotel.
Right.
I'm going to feed you real good. I'm going to make sure that you're pampered. You want to get spa, massage. Make sure you have plenty to eat. So I treat you real nice. It's kind of hard for you to root against me, and I treat you that well, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's what happens. So anyway, that's that home. That's that
home field advantage.
Home field advantage. But I also will say that it's a lot of pressure to be an official. I mean, you've seen high school games where folks wonder.
It's pressure in my son's basketball team.
Y'all those parents that screaming at the referee. I seen y'all. Y'all crazy.
It's pressure in those games.
Oh my goodness. You ever go to those games, Lionel, with it?
I coached them. I coached them.
And the parents want to jump on the referees?
They want to jump on the coaches.
Oh.
Coaches, refs, whoever ain't calling
They don't
the right
care.
calls.
Yeah.
Wow. So y'all go to the game ready to start a fight. All right, folks, we're going to take a station break in a minute. Did you find that tape for me? All right, folks, I hope it's legible. So fire away, Mr. Lionel.
Badgers. Koenig looking for help. Decker. They're going to run him off the three if they can. Bounces out. For 3 seconds. He's going to run out of time. And the Blue Devils are the national champions of 2015.
Duke game, and basically they were calling some of the key players from Wisconsin, and they were taking these shots. And it sounded like, okay. And then all of a sudden it just didn't happen, and they lost the game. So at that moment, I actually sat there, and my mouth had hit the floor because I literally thought that Duke was not going to be able to beat Wisconsin for what we talked about a little bit earlier. The depth, the strength, maybe not. Well, the strength, the agility, the ability of Wisconsin, I just didn't think Duke would be able to match that for the entire 40 minutes, especially as they got into foul trouble. Now, after the game ended, we learned a whole bunch of other things. We'll get back to that in a few. We're going to take a quick station break. Coach Tanya and Roland Bubba Grimes, again, 301-429-9247. Let's get some feedback on the national championship game. And then we want to talk about the rest of the tournament. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the press conferences. So, Brandon, Coach Tanya, y'all sit tight. We'll be right back.